After the departure of Moses, Israel mourned for 30 days. The time of mourning is over, but today we celebrate. We celebrate a life well lived, a life very inspirational to us all. And so we continue to pray for Mzee Laurenti Magesa, using the words of the psalmist in Psalm 23. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. In the house of the Lord shall I dwell forever and ever. And we believe indeed that Magesa dwells in your house today and always. May the soul of Laurenti Magesa and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Tumsifu Yesu Kristo. Good afternoon, dear friends, and welcome to this memorial conference organized by Hekima University College to celebrate the life of Mzee Laurenti Magesa, who was a member of the faculty of our Jesuit School of Theology here at Hekima from 2009 to 2021. Mzee Magesa was born in 1946 in Musoma, Tanzania. He attended primary school in Musoma, then secondary school in Makoko, and high school at St. Mary's Junior Seminary in Mwanza. After his major seminary training in Tungamo and Kipalapala, he was ordained to the priesthood in 1974. From 1974 to 1975, he served as assistant parish priest in Nyarombo Parish, Musoma. From 77 to 78, he was assistant director, Makoko Center, Musoma. From 79 to 85, he was in Canada for studies. He obtained his STD from St. Paul University, Ottawa in 1985, and his PhD from the University of Ottawa that same year. The title of his PhD thesis was Ujamaa Socialism in Tanzania, a Theological Assessment. On his return to his native Tanzania, he served as parish priest at Masonga Parish from 1985 to 1986, Sirari Parish from 92 to 94, Ingri Parish from 97 to 2000, all in the Diocese of Musoma. From 2002 to 2004, he was assistant pastor in Albany, New York, in the US. And from 2005 to 2008, he served as chaplain at Baraki Postulancy in the Diocese of Musoma. He held research and teaching positions at various institutions, notably at Kwea, Tangaza, DePaul University, Chicago, and Woodstock Theological Center, Washington, D.C., among other places. He has received various awards, including a PhD honoris causa in 2018 from DePaul University, Chicago. He was a founding member of the Ecumenical Symposium of East African Theologians. Mzee Magesa fulfilled a variety of roles during his earthly pilgrimage. He was a son, a brother, a priest, a theologian, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, and the list goes on. He touched countless lives and blazed a trail for generations of African theologians. His immense contribution to the church in Africa and beyond cannot be quantified. In this regard, the impressive list of his published works has now become a must-read for students of African theology. Some of his works, as you know, include African Religion, The Moral Traditions of Abundant Life in 1997, Anatomy of Inculturation, Transforming the Church in Africa, 2004, African Religion in the Dialogue Debate, from intolerance to coexistence in 2010, and What is Not Sacred, African Spirituality in 2013, just to name a few. As previously mentioned, the Jesuit School of Theology at Hekima University College, Nairobi, was privileged to count Mzee Magesa among its lecturers. He lived and taught at Hekima from 2009 to 2021, sharing his knowledge with great generosity and unassumingly mentoring students and young lecturers with magnanimity, simply being a companion and friend to many. The walls of Hekima still reverberate with the echo of his humble, effaced, and inspiring presence. They bear witness to the words of the Senegalese poet Birago Diop, for whom those who are dead have never gone away. They are in the shadows darkening around. They are in the shadows fading into day. The dead are not under the ground. They are in the trees that quiver. They are in the woods that weep. They are in the waters of the rivers. They are in the waters that sleep. They are in the crowds. They are in the homestead. The dead are never dead. Mzee Magesa could say in all truth with St. Paul, bonum cetamen cetavi, cursum consumavi, et fidem servavi. I have fought a good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Mzee Magesa's legacy will live on beyond the 76 years of his earthly pilgrimage. He will enjoy in the countless lives he has touched. As we gather to celebrate his life, we are blessed to have here with us his brother, Professor Evaristi Magoti. Will you please stand to be acknowledged? Thank you. He is accompanied by his second half, by his wife, Davidika Shota, who is somewhere. Thank you. But also by Sister Susanna Kiendi, who is here with us. Thank you. They have all made a trip from Tanzania to attend this event. And Mrs. Gina Schneider, a close friend of Mzee Magesa, is here with us also. She comes to us all the way from the US to attend the event. So we are very honored and privileged to have you here with us today for this event. Now, before I give you quickly the rundown of the program, there is a short video that we are going to share with you. It hasn't been tested yet, so if it doesn't work, I'm sure you'll be forgiving. So.
When troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. When I am on your shoulders, raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulder.
So thank you very much to Professor Evariste Magoti, who provided the pictures, and Dr. Jean-Luc Enyege for the video. And the sound in the background was You Raise Me Up by Josh Groban, which was one of the most liked songs of Musée Magesa. So thank you very much. So we are going to have a first reflection by Professor Magoti, a testimony from the family. So who was Musée Magesa? So a testimony from the family. Most of us have known him from, so to speak, from the outside. So it'd be good to hear from the family, their own experience of who Musée Magesa was. Our second reflection will be from Marcelo Wineza on the theological legacy of Musée Magesa. The third one by Dominic Tumuseni, the future of African theology. And then the fourth and final reflection will be by Mrs. Gina Schneider, testimony of a friend. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I'm going to invite Professor Magoti to come ahead and speak to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dear Reverend Father Dr. Marcel Wineza, the principal of Hekima College. Dear Reverend Father Dr. Emmanuel Foro, the deputy principal of this college. Dear heads of departments, different departments of the college, dear members of staff, students, and the community of Hekima, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to begin this testimony by expressing my sincere thanks to Reverend Dr. Marcel Wineza and his team. Not so much for inviting me here, because I've been a regular visitor to this college, but for spending time and resources to organize this memorial conference in honor of my brother, Professor Laurenti Magesa, who spent most of his happy years here in the college as a professor of theology. We in the family of Mzee Corneli Magoti Mjora are extremely honored to witness the efforts that are being made by Hekima University College to recognize Professor Magesa's contribution to the development of African theology. The family recommends your efforts and prays for their success. Now the task assigned to me this afternoon is to try to answer the question, who was Mzee Magesa? At first, I thought it is a very simple question to answer because although most of the young generation do not know him, to many participating in this conference this afternoon, Magesa is a household name. In academic circles, he was popularly known as a teacher, a scholar, and an intellectual. So I said to myself, well, if I go there, I will just, tell them, I will just repeat what they already know. Then after some days, I came to a realization that my task was to give a family testimony, that is to describe who Magesa was to the family and how the family understood him, and not to give an account of how he was known in academic circles. But the confidence I had in my new discovery did not last long. I discovered that even the task of providing a family testimony about who Magesa was ran into difficulties. Then I remembered Jesus' question to his disciples, who do they say I am? The answers are known to all of you, theologians. But you can appreciate the doubts they had and the different questions they gave to that question. And then he addressed them directly. Who do you say I am? You guys who are spending time with me, eating my food, we all go around with you. Who do you say that I am? And even then, even to his close friends, it was not easy. You can, only one, I think, managed to scrabble something down. You are the Son of God or something like that. So only one. So what does this mean? It means the question of one's identity is not easy to describe. It's we are kind of mysteries walking around, I am a married man, I have a wife, but sometimes she escapes then you wonder, is this the guy, the woman I married? Is this the... And I think she has the same questions about me. Is this the guy I married? We are mysteries. It's difficult to really get down to the depths of one's person and really describe him or her as he really is. So, but as I was, going around, thinking of what I should say this evening, I found a small piece of paper in his bag, in one of the bags he brought with him to my family, to my house when he was sick. And I don't know why, but when I opened it, I found that paper, and I found a working title of a paper he wanted to write about his experience of cancer. It read like this: battling with terminal cancer as a Christian, a priest, and a theologian. When he was sick, we knew, those who were there, I knew what he was going through, the kind of questions he was asking, the kind of pain he was experiencing. But I really didn't know that even at such a painful moment, he wanted to write down his experience of cancer. So it struck me very much. And I said, one day when I have time, I should perhaps complete this article and tell his friends how he experienced his pain and suffering caused by cancer. And to me, this had another revelation. It indicated to me what he thought of himself. He considered himself to be a priest, first of all, a Christian, a priest, and a theologian. So I said, okay, in my talk, I'm going to structure my testimonies along these lines, according to these functions. Now we'll begin with the testimony of Magesa as a Christian. And here it is important to give the context. In those years, he was baptized in 1946, I think, few days after birth. And like all children, he didn't know anything about the Christian faith until much later. But the context in which he grew up, it is a context in which very few people or very few young boys were becoming Christians. In fact, he was one of the few who accepted to follow the Christian faith, went to a Christian school, and practiced his faith. When I grew up, because between him and me, there is a difference of about 10 years. So he's much older. But when I grew up, the first thing I saw, the first thing I witnessed was his interaction with people, young boys and girls who did not have faith, who were not Christians. And in our village, there were so many. So he was interacting with them, playing football with them. You know, this is the kind of life you find in all the rural areas. As I grew up and went to primary school also, and then secondary school, I began to realize that this person, this man, was a man of faith. Whether it is because our father was a catechist, he was obliging us to say prayer every evening, I don't know. But for some of us, it did not really pick up. But for him, he was always praying. When my father would call a meeting, a prayer meeting, almost every evening, actually, we would all go there and start praying. And Magesa was praying seriously. You know, you could see this guy was praying seriously. Well, some of us was trying to, you know, to evade those obligatory prayers. You know how they are. You're obliged to pray because your father says so. But in Magesa, no, it was not a question of you being obliged. It is something that came from his heart. And you could see him, you know, very serious, taking those prayers seriously. And I was wondering, a man of charity. Magesa was a man of charity. In our family, I don't know anybody who was not touched by Magesa. All of us, I think, in the family benefited enormously from his generosity. I, for one, can bear testimony to that. Because if I am here today, it is because of Magesa. You know, some of you know that I was a priest, then left the priesthood, then got married, and then I became a teacher at the university and so forth. But I think I managed to go through all that because of him. The amount of consultation I had with him, I remember, you know, we spent nights discussing, exchanging letters. What should I do? They say once you are a priest, you can't leave. So what can I do? And I remember he told me, you see, if you think you will be happy outside the priesthood, then go ahead. But do it properly. Do it properly, meaning you should seek permission from the congregation, from the Pope, and then you will be released. And that is what I did. And when I tried to ask him, so now what shall I live? How shall I live? Because, you know, when you are a priest, you have some privileges, you know. I don't know how it is with the Jesuits, but with the white fathers, you don't know where your meals come from. You are just given a timetable to appear at the table, and you find you find everything is there. From breakfast to dinner, you don't have to worry about food. And you don't have to worry about your accommodation, All those things are taken care of. Your health is taken care of. I think as a white father, if you got sick, you were not treated here in Nairobi, in Tanzania. No. They fly you to Europe, to the UK. You get the best medical attention needed. So it was not easy to leave all those privileges, and not only that, but a bit of money also, You say mass, they give you money, stipend, and all that. So it's very good, So my question was, how should I live after that? And the answer to me was, all these men who are outside the priesthood, how do they live? You think they are the only one who is worried? There are hundreds of men and women outside the priesthood who are living. So why do you think if you leave the priesthood, you will die of hunger? He was a bit rude, but I think he was telling me something. He was telling me something, but there is life outside there. This is. So really, what I want to say is that he touched my life in a profound way. And I can even say, if today I have a PhD, it is because he contributed towards it. I was able to go to Birmingham and pay all my PhD costs for 3 years. So this is what I mean by generosity, by his charity. He was concerned about my life, but also about the life of our brothers and sisters in the family. Magesa as a priest. When he became a priest, I was in secondary school. I had started my first year at Makoko Seminary, and I attended his ordination. But what I should say about this is this. Again, the context. At that time, becoming a priest, it was something unique. You were a category apart. You were respected. People respected you. Everybody, father. And you were supposed to provide the answers to almost all questions of life. If they have financial problems, they come to you. If they have psychological problems, they come to you. If they have, So priests were elevated. An African priest, moreover, he was different from our other people. What I witnessed is that Magesa, although he understood himself, he understood that the priesthood is a privileged function, job. It did not enter into his head, He did not become proud of his priesthood. And there is a word they use. He was very humble as a priest, very humble. And sometimes to my own annoyance, because he would accept everything. You go there, he goes. You turn right, he turns. You turn left, he turns. And I was telling, but can't you refuse? I mean, what kind of a guy are you? Why can't you say no? So he did the things he did not like. He took up posts he did not like, but because of being humble, of humility, he accepted to take up those posts and to take up those functions, which either other priests did not want to do, or simply they thought it was not worth for a person who is well educated. So his priesthood was characterized by the virtue of humility. A virtue, a character, a trait which most of us find it difficult, especially if you're in a position of privilege. If you're in a position if you're in a category apart, a class of its own, a class of your own, it's very difficult to be humble. As a theologian, actually, I didn't know this word theologian. When I grew up, I didn't know this business of theologians and all that. But what I saw in him was the habit of reading. Already as a young man, he was reading books. And I remember one of the books he gave to me, and I was in high school. It was a full collection of Karana. A full collection of Karana. I don't know where he got it. But when I finished from, he gave it to me. And I said, this guy, what am I going to do with Karana? Most of you have read Karana. You know the language he uses, you know. And our English in Tanzania, really. To read Karana. So I thought this man is joking. So, but I didn't throw them away. I really didn't throw them away. I kept them, and then after my ordination, I went to Mozambique. I worked there for 3 years, and I still kept them in my library. Only later did I realize, when my English became a bit better, and then I understood this business of theology. That's when I started to appreciate the value of that collection. And until today, I have it. So as a young man, he liked to read books, novels. The first novels I read were from him, James Hadley Chase. Did you read those books? James Hadley Chase. He was reading those books, and I was wondering, what's the relationship between theology and the James Hadley Chase? Hardly a relation, but he was reading those books, and I think in his mind, those books were revealing something about the nature of human beings and all that. Later on, he started writing. I didn't know he was writing. He came home one evening and he gave me that little booklet, Liberation Theology. If you have read the green book, Liberation Theology in Africa, or something like that. By then, I really didn't know what liberation is, what has it got to do with Africa. But he was already thinking of an Africa that was free, that would be free, that would be liberated, an Africa that would be proud of, an Africa whose people would be proud of themselves, proud of their own culture. And in the family, there wasn't much theologizing, actually, except when the two of us met and they started discussing about the nature of God, you know, that kind of things. But really, there wasn't much theologizing in the family. Yet, when some members of the family went to him for consultation, they wanted, or in a crisis, or they wanted clarification about religious issues, he was ready to provide answers to those questions, or at least to help them clarify those issues for them. So this is, I was given only 15 minutes, and I think it's already, I've already passed my time. Before leaving the scene, as it were, I would like to invite Sister Ndoti and my wife, Davidica, to bring a small parcel which we brought for the college. And I would ask Father Marcel, please, to stand up. And receive a small parcel we have prayed. Eh? Asante sana. So thank you. Asanteni sana. Sorry.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Professor Magoti. Thank you really for that testimony that provides a perspective on Mzee Magesa that we don't have as people looking at him just from outside. Without wasting much time, I'm going to call on Dr. Marcelo Wineza, our principal, to say something about the theological legacy of Mzee Magesa.
All protocols observed, I will immediately go to the team, but let me really acknowledge in a very profound and grateful way your words to you, Professor Magoti, and the family. And something that was so touching is how you accompanied Professor Magesa in the last days. We would say that you are doing your duty, but Magesa had the diocese too. And so, but you took him to the very last days. And I remember when I was in Lebanon for tensionship, we would be speaking when he's in your home and you are cracking jokes, yet you know this man is counting days. And even at the hospital in Aga Khan, the very last day when you were with Father Roberto, when he came to visit him the last days, and Magesa was actually consoling you, say, please don't cry. My time has come. And you will not have been able to do that without the support of your wife. So, and she was accompanying you all the way. So please join me as we thank you. Join me, thank the wife of Professor Magoti. Asanteni sana, tunashukuru, and Mungu akubariki. Kubariki sana. Sharing about the legacy of the late Laurenti, Professor Magesa, is an ongoing exercise that cannot be summed up in this short exercise that I have here. And a legacy certainly may mean one's faith, one's ethics or core values. A legacy may also be a monetary or one's assets. So there are several understandings of legacy. A legacy may come from one's character, one's reputation, and the life you lead, setting an example for others to follow and guiding them for the future. So when Father Norbert Lituang asked me to share on this, I say, what do we actually mean by legacy? And a legacy certainly means giving something that will be valued and treasured by those who are left behind. Professor Laurenti Magesa, and as we have just heard, has left us a legacy, and I want to focus briefly on the theological legacy that can be analyzed through different lenses, perspectives, approaches, and attitudes as one seeks to understand the task, the responsibility, and the vocation of an African theologian, African Christian theologian. And writing on the importance of keeping memory of women saints and prophets, the American Elizabeth Johnson, in her book, Prophets and Friends of God, she had this to say, and it is fitting that we are doing this on this Memorial Day on the 2nd of June. She says, and I quote, remembering the great crowds of female friends of God and prophets opens up the possibility for the future. Their lives bespeak of an agenda, an unfinished agenda now in our hands. Their memory is a challenge to action. Their companionship points the way. End of quote. You'll find that in Friends of God and Prophets on page 169. Thus here, we are here to carry this legacy, this unfinished agenda, but also we are rememberers and custodians of a future yet unknown. And moreover, theologically, we also have the duty to carry on the mission left behind by the giants of Africa, like Magesa. In this short exercise, I will highlight some areas that seem to be central to Magesa's thought and personality, and I don't pretend to be exhaustive. And towards the end, I will flesh them out with a personal note. First, the writings of Magesa make it clear that theologians are shaped by their situations that confront them, in which they have to theologize and teach. Magesa was deeply shaped by the history and the context in which he was born, one of independence in Africa. And Magesa was deeply shaped. One can go on. It's a big section that could actually be a whole book in itself. But he was also shaped by a post-Vatican context, in post-Vatican II context, in which he was raised, shaped by a missionary church that formed him and sent him to school, and he doesn't shy talk about it. A serious engagement with his peers who wanted to live out their faith in a truly African way. And these include Benezet Bujo, Ewart Shota, John Mary Warigo, Jean Makela, and Jesse Mugambi, to name a few. In this historical context, Magesa took to heart Pope St. John Paul VI, and in his words and his visit to Uganda in 1969, and Paul VI had this to say: Africa can and must develop an African Christianity. And Father Jean-Luc Enyege has written a wonderful article on this in a book dedicated to Magesa. Magesa had already been influenced by Gustavo Gutierrez's book that came out in 1971, A Theology of Liberation, History, Politics, and Salvation. And this book had a profound influence on Magesa. So as you ended your speech, you spoke of liberation. We will see the connection. He was earlier influenced by Populorum Progressio, the development of peoples and the economy of the world that should save many, not the few, by Paul VI. And also, it is not surprising that when his first monograph came out, he wanted to make it clear that liberation is the way to go for the church. And he entitled it The Church and Liberation in Africa in 1976. So we can see the context that shaped Magesa. The question of why are the poor was central to Magesa. It was not an abstraction. It was a question that President Nyerere had asked the church. In the same vein, it's a question that shaped Magesa, and he would later write his doctoral dissertation, as Father Norbert mentioned, on Ujamaa Socialism in Tanzania, a critical assessment. For Magesa, there can not be an authentic or adequate Christian theology if we fail to take liberation and history seriously. This is just a brief, one can go on. So the historical context of Magesa is a book in itself. Secondly, theology is done not in a vacuum. It is contextual. This is confirmed by John Baptist Metz, who contends that upon looking at Auschwitz, it is clear that an adequate separation between systematic theology and historical theology, between theology and history, between truth and history is not possible. So a serious theologian must take history seriously. In other words, theology is rooted in history and in the political and economic realities of our world, which are often marked with joy and also with the suffering of God's people. There is a universal import from contextual theologies. They have something to teach the rest of humanity. We begin to conceptualize the universal from the particular. Boston College theologian Robert Guezueta remarks, and I quote, "Theologies that stress social location do reach towards the universal, but always in and through particular expressions in relation to other particular expressions. Explaining the relevance of contextual theology, another theologian, Joseph Komachak, similarly notes a recognition that an ecclesiology remains formal and abstraction is there as long as it remains at the level of merely theological and the universal, ignoring the subjects and their local communities. So Magesa enters into this conversation with others, taking context seriously. Thirdly, Magesa's theology revolves around Christian themes. Actually, we call him a moral theologian, but as I read him, I see more of a systematic theologian. The sense of mystery. It is not surprising that a theologian will start from this concept. In the books that he gave you of Karl Rahner, there is one, The Hearer of the Word, of Rahner. And he argues that we stand before God listening and awaiting of a possible revelation. There will always occur something like a revelation, namely the speaking of and the silence of God. And we always and naturally hear the word or the silence of the absolute God. For Magesa, the quest for God is ever anew and endless, and God is bigger than Christianity. Divine presence in new circumstances raises new questions which require new answers, or at least new understanding, to quote him. Here lies the vocation of a theologian, he says. So understanding and practicing this mystery, rooted in the love of Jesus, whom he names, together with other professors, others, he names as a brother ancestor, and also whom he cherished in his incarnation, is something that Magesa was strong about. So Magesa is not just a moral theologian, he's actually a systematic theologian. And his readiness to entertain unconditional intellectual and spiritual openness to the ongoing inspiration and guidance of the Holy Spirit. So if you've read some of his readings, you will see spirit ecclesiology, which he writes about. Magesa had a sincere appreciation and respect for the beauty and sacredness of creation. And I will come back to that later. So one of his legacies is that actually he tackles issues within a context, but all issues of systematic theology. Fourth, theology is not content with answering questions that people are no longer answering. It is not satisfied with fixed solutions, but seeks to understand how God leads God's creation to new horizons. For Magesa, a theologian's mind should have an extensive imagination, a wider horizon, like a person faced with an expansive ocean before them. Magesa writes, while trying to hold firmly onto the understanding of divine revelation, I've had, and I am quoting here, I've had to adjust my theological reflection as a process of interpreting for myself and for the church the great and ongoing conversation between God and a particular community. I happen to be to do this many times. I kept changing my mind. Magesa refused to be confined to easy categories. It's a legacy for theologians. He was a theologian whose mind was always searching. He refused to protect his own skin in order to find easy life in the church. And indeed, as I was reflecting, I thought one can ascribe these words to him. One theologian was once censored by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And when they asked him why he has not quit the church, the theologian responded this. And he said, I came to know Christ through the church. Obedience and remaining that the church is a price I pay for that first encounter. So Magesa, who, as you know, had some problems, this is that fidelity that remains also a legacy. Fifth, Magesa's theological legacy also lies in his exploration of the identity of Jesus. Who is Jesus? In fact, at his funeral at Musoma Catholic Cathedral on 17th August 2022, Magesa's bishop, Michael Msonganzila, asked, "What do you think was Magesa's constant question? How do you think you would answer in a summary about the legacy of Magesa?" He was speaking to the whole congregation in the church, and he said, "I think for me, Magesa kept asking this question, and you Africans, who do you say that Jesus is?" Finding our own answer. Beyond the Christological controversies of the 3rd and 4th centuries over the nature of Jesus, Magesa wanted to know Jesus who does things for people. So beyond the philosophical categories. So we have to understand Jesus by asking, what does he do for us, for the community, and for those to whom we are related, beyond abstraction. So the African question of Jesus is not lost in a philosophical debate about the substance of Christ. It is rooted in what Jesus does. So it is not unreasonable to say that this explains his passion for the servant of God, Julius Nyerere, and he writes, "For me, Nyerere embodied the spirit of the core of Christ," and he quotes, "Whoever wants to be great must be a servant of all." I have a few minutes left. Let me give two other points. Magesa, in his legacy, called for a different evangelization method. Not only in his stress on liberation and incarceration, but a few years ago, he visited Rwanda, my home country, and he wrote a chapter, an excellent chapter in a book that got published 3 months ago. The title of the chapter is "Learning from a Tragedy Towards a New Evangelization in Africa After the Genocide in Rwanda." We took Magesa to the different scenes, particularly to the church of Ntarama and Nyamata. We were together with Professor O'Neill. He almost broke down because initially he had been hearing what people spoke about, had never been there, or misconceptions on YouTube. And then he had this to write. For about 3 months in 1994, between April and mid-July, a systematic massacre of upwards 800,000 people, mostly of ethnic Tutsi, took place in Rwanda, in what is now universally known through the United Nations as a genocide against the Tutsi. It is globally recognized, whereas the Catholic Church, in many of its members at various levels, was considerably involved in the horror. So we have to question what went wrong. And then he gives several points in rethinking what evangelization should mean in Rwanda. The new evangelization, not only in Rwanda and in Africa, must include the indispensable dimension of the process of justice, peace, and reconciliation. And then he goes on to quote the 1971 document of the World Synod of Bishops, Justice in the World. And you remember what it says: action on behalf of justice and participation in the transformation of the world fully appear to be a constitutive dimension of the preaching of the gospel. Without doing this in Africa, taking justice and reconciliation seriously, we are doing a wrong evangelization. He finishes. So he gives several points there. And let me conclude, since this is a memorial conference, not just an academic one, conclude with a personal note of Magesa. Some affective lessons from Professor Magesa. For Magesa, the first act of theology is a life lived with love. You will recall the words of Paul 6. Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. I saw this in Magesa's life. Here at Hekima, he will be the first to celebrate you. He will even be happier than you who have succeeded. I arrived here coming from Boston after he defended, he was the very first person to take me out. Now you have your PhD. And then he pushed us to publish together with Elise to have the conference, Elise Rutagambwa. There were roadblocks on the way. He said, guys, this is going to be a legacy. And the book has come out, and the chapter of him posthumously published. And then I accompanied him in July, in May 2021, when he retired from here. And as I was about to come, he said, Marcel, I know you are still young in your 40s, but think of writing an autobiography. I said, Magesa, you must be joking. Autobiography in your 40s, who will take me seriously? And he said, I really mean it. Write your story, because it will touch hearts. And then, long story cut short, I said, I will think about it. Magesa wrote the preface. Actually, he ordered you to write the preface. I got to know. He read the book, but he dictated you the preface, and you typed and sent me. And as I speak, yesterday, just one example, someone who read the book fulfilled Magesa's dream, or yesterday, not to count what happened before, someone sent us $11,550 because of the book. And so you begin to see someone who saw maybe more than you can see in yourself. And lastly, Magesa was very clear that a theologian should strive to inspire. For him, and I quote, never underestimate the power of an approving pat on the back. These are his words. A positive stroke from a superior to keep one going. When I was in internship in Lebanon, he was always concerned about my security situation. You remember we talked several times. This was not often the concern of many. Or if they had, they never expressed it. I am sure at my return to HUC, probably he would have come for my final vows. Magesa made it clear, at least for me, that the labor of a theologian is never in vain. He leaves us a legacy of hope, and I think that's really someone who has fought a good fight, as Norbert puts it, and probably he reassures us in Ratzinger's words that a true theologian should keep searching for truth. If I quote what Ratzinger says, what the church needs today, as always, are not adulators to extol the status quo, but men and women whose humility and obedience, you mentioned that, are no less than their passion for truth. Men and women who are not there just to seek easy life, and they bear witness, who are even ready to die for what they believe. And I think this is echoed by Ratzinger's successor, who dreams of a church that takes risks. And Francis puts it this way: those who take risks, those theologians, they will make mistakes. They may even make a blunder. This will pass. Perhaps even a letter from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith will arrive for you, telling you what you said, that you said such and such. But do not worry. Explain whatever you have to explain, but move forward. Open the doors, Francis continues. Do something there where life calls for it. I would rather have a church that makes mistakes for doing something than one that gets sick for being closed in. It's a legacy, I think, in the many ways that Magesa has left us. We are grateful to his legacy. And since he was here in this School of Theology, where we have many young men on track to ordination, I remember in a recollection that Father Jean-Luc organized and invited him to speak. These were his concluding words, and I conclude with those. I think it's a legacy for everyone who wants to be a priest, or those of us who are already priests. He said this: I conclude with a piece of advice. It is important not to be a burden to yourself as a priest, doing things simply out of duty, This will eventually crush you. But even more important, try not to be a burden to others on account of your own discontents in life. May Mzee Magesa continue to find a favor with God and pray for us. Sometimes we do not know the treasure we have until we lose it. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marcel Wineza, for those inspiring words about the theological legacy of Mzee Magesa. Our next speaker will be Dr. Dominic Tumuseni, whom I affectionately call my enemy. I invited him for this against my best judgment, but we'll listen to him. You're most welcome, Baba Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my enemy. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today. And I'm very grateful to Father Marcel, who invited me to be part of this. Because, I think I know Magesa in a very different way from what we have heard. I'm happy to share that. As Father Nobe said, who was in charge of this thing, said to me when Father Marcel invited me, if it was in my power, there's no way you were going to be part of this. So don't be surprised if you start bringing a piece of paper before my time comes to an end. So please give me my enemy. Let's make peace. Yes, I'm also grateful to the Mzee himself for his life that has led to this kind of gathering. I think we are gathered here because he lived a very beautiful life that we all aspire and which has inspired many people. And yes, this memorial is on the Feast of All Souls, and it's because he's no longer with us, and then we remember him in that way. But I think, as has been already said, it's about his life, and that's what we celebrate. From what we have heard from the family and from Father Marcel, Magesa is a well-known scholar. He is a scholar everywhere, all over the world, and his academic achievements will be remembered for many generations to come. But as for me, I think I want to remember him just as a good person. He was just a good man. We have Father Gaspar, who calls himself goodness, but yeah, he was really goodness in himself. Yeah, that's how he is. So that's the thing I think I just want to say, even if my time comes out before I finish, remember that he was just a good man. And if African theology is to go anywhere, if it is able to bring out the good humanity in us, then it is a future. Without that, it will remain nothing. So that's what I remember of him as a good man. So I begin with a few pictures here. You know, I was sent when I was preparing and thinking of coming to do theology. My provincial sent me to Ekima to look at some African theologians and talk to him specifically about, well, we talked about many things, but what I remember was, how his time as a pastor influenced his theology and everything. So when I came here now for this, and we lived in the same community, I found the same good man. So that's why I just wanted to share some of these pictures. And as you can see there, he's worshiping my dress there. And we are having a good time joking because, as you know, I think that teaching for me is not something that is very important. It's a performance. So I do some act. So my companions in the house, they say I don't dress up. At least I don't dress up like a colonial headmaster in a coat and tie. I wear costume when I go to class as a way of performing. So here is one of the moments in Huruma, and I think Father Jean-Luc claims that he took this picture, but I think it's Father Anise. We still have to verify that one there, but that's our life there. We always got it. So the next picture, that's myself and Magesa on a trip somewhere, which if you give me a few beers, I might really say more about what that trip was. And it was somewhere on the Rift Valley. It was myself and himself and Father Jean-Luc and Father, one of my friends here, Father Zundi, and went on this trip. And I didn't want to go, and he said, no, let's just take a trip. And we ended up somewhere, which was a very beautiful experience. Like I said, you need to give me a few beers to reveal exactly what happened there. The next one. So this was us there at his place somewhere in Tanzania at I think it was at his home, somewhere just near the border. I forgot the name of the place. What is it called? Yeah, yes, that was the place. There we were, and we had a very good time. And yes, the next one quickly. And here we are just enjoying ourselves as little kids there, and he's somewhere there in the background laughing at us, and we invited him, come and join us, and he said, no, do your own thing. So, you know, where we say, when you're in the shadow of an adult, you can just play around, like, you know, they say that you see a cow doing some stupid things, they know there's somebody to protect. This is the feeling that we had when we had these other Jesuit scholars, and we're having a meal in the traditional way, and we're trying to Africanize things. So yeah, that's it. I just wanted. So the video, you've already watched that, so you can really remove that. This is the video when we were dancing. There was a lot of dancing, and so it is more the human being that I remember. And like I said, if that kind of human being, if theology is to go further, it has to acknowledge this humanity, just to be a good person, not so much what you write. So let me quickly go through some of the ideas here. The topic that I was given, Father Marcel approached me and said, I know you are interested in African theology. Why don't you say something about the future of African theology? The future of African theology. You know, this is a very difficult thing. Who knows the future unless you are a prophet Ayo here? Who knows? And I really found it difficult. And Father Gas was just saying, just go to the library, pick 5 of his books and read the back covers, and then just, you know, what they say, and think about the future. So I decided, no, let me do something a little bit serious here to honor the man. So I went on to take the example of the prophets of old, whom Father Eowa talks about, you know, that when they talk of the future, they're always looking somewhere behind to the past. And yes, they do talk of the future, but they are reminding the people, the Israelites, about the past, about the covenant. And they are telling them, you know, if you really move away from that covenant, you're heading for doom. Let's just go. So the future is the past. So as I want to talk about the future of African theology, let me go back a bit to the past and see what happened. And maybe we can pick up some things that can give us some guidelines on how African theology can go into the future. And I'll take this route to the past through a very personal journey into African theology and into theology in general. I still don't consider myself a theologian. I'm a God-header. And I just found myself, even when I decided to become a Jesuit, I was just inspired by Father Ulbrich, who was wearing his socks and sandals and visiting the sick and burying the dead. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't know anything about theology. So I found myself, so that's the journey. So I did my theology, all my theological studies out of Africa. My first and second cycles as the bachelor's and the master's was in the UK, in London. And my third cycle, the PhD, was in America. And in all those places, there was not a single book on African theology, not even a single African scholar that we read. So here I was, you know, reading Kaurana and all these other important people. But when it was decided that I should go for a PhD, my provincial, then he asked me, what is it that you want to do? And at that time, with this volatile political situation in Zimbabwe, And I was thinking, let me just do something about politics, political theology. And I'd read a book by William Kavner, I think he's a Tipol. I'd read a book about him on torture and Eucharist, about the situation in Chile, where he says, you know, the Eucharist can actually be an antidote to the torture. So I was thinking, Christian rituals like Eucharist and Sacrament of Reconciliation, can we use them in our situation in Zimbabwe? So that's what I wanted to do. So when I told my provincial, he actually wrote to William Kavner and asked him if he could help how I can move forward. William Kavner responded, and he said, unfortunately, there's no PhD program at DePaul, but if Dominic wants, he can apply to Loyola Chicago, and we can work together from there. So that's how I ended up in Chicago. A few weeks after arriving in Chicago, I took a train. It was a train trip to DePaul, which was only a few stops from where I was staying. I went to see William Kavner. We talked about the different ways in which I can develop my ideas. But he just then he said, what about, do you know any African theologian that, who are the current African theologians? And here I was embarrassed and that I was struggling to identify the current African theologian. I'd come all the way from Africa. Then said, well, there's a guy somewhere, I think he's in Notre Dame, and his name is Katongole. He's a very good one there. And you are a Jesuit. You must know Orobato. I think he's also very good. And yeah, I think people like Magesa, they are still very much relevant. So imagine how embarrassing it is that an American is telling you about African theologians and you want to talk about Rana. So I went back and changed my mind about political theology. That's why I said, no, let's put that aside. And I started reading. I started reading African theologians. I began with those that I remember from my time in Arupe when we're doing philosophy, people like Mbiti and Nyamiti. And I then, as I was reading, trying to find out more, I came to the conclusion that much of African theology of the 20th century, because I have to emphasize 20th century, every time I say African theology, some people want to go to Augustine and to Tertullian and they say they are Africans. But no, I'm talking really of this contemporary era. Now, I found out that, you know, they were just a part of the scholarly tradition in African history, in African literature, in African traditional religions, and in African philosophy. They were struggling with one thing, which was the metaphysical construction of Africa by Westerners. All they were trying to do was to say, no, this is us, this is who we are. So African theology was part of that discourse. How do we understand ourselves as Africans? And how do we really respond to how Westerners were looking at? They were looking at us. So they were reacting to the experience of colonialism. So I ended up concluding that a key figure in that whole was Placide Temples. And those of you who know from who was Placide Temples, a Franciscan missionary in the Congo, and is well known for his 1945 book, The Bantu Philosophy. And the main thing that he said is that Bantus, Africans, have a philosophy. Very surprised. They have a philosophy. Some people did not believe that Bantus have a philosophy. And he was saying that if at all we want to catechize them or to to civilize them, first of all, understand their philosophy. And then we know how to engage with them. That's what Placide Temples had said. And you know, many other people came after that. And what has dominated African theology since that time was this thinking: do Africans have their own worldview, their own philosophy, different from those of the Westerners? And how should we engage with that? And you take your person like Mbiti, who dismisses what Temples is saying, but he takes the same position where he said, no, we have our own philosophy, which we can actually use to understand the Bible and to understand what Jesus is all about. That's why he talked of an African concept of time.
there is a concept of time that is African. We'll not go into that. It's something that we know, but I'm just pointing it to show that there's this thinking that there's something that is peculiarly African that we can use in our theology. Of course, Nyamiti takes a slightly different approach and say, there's really nothing much different. It's the same revelation of Jesus Christ, but it is expressed in different categories according to African needs. So it's just the same thing expressed differently. So probably we need to, not so much to recover like what Mbiti is doing, but to recognize that we are doing the same thing differently. Well, we come quickly, you go to a Busi Bulaga, he comes and says, we don't really need to talk about African and European, I knew. Okay, take care. My name, let me just quickly. Let's talk about let's talk about these. Let's forget about these European categories. They are fetishes. So we need a Christianity without fetishes. Put them aside, and then they dismissed them. So that was the thing. That whole discourse of recovery, recognition, or dismissing led to what is known as enculturation that has dominated African theology, isn't it? And African, like I said, all these African theologians were working along, just like Pan-Africanism, negritude, and they were trying to find a way of responding to these new independent nations. In the 60s, 70s, Africans were becoming independent, and they were part of that process. So, but there's a guy who says there was no independence. All there was a myth. It's just that a few black elites took over from the colonial elites. So these guys were not attending to the political, social, economic problems. So we did not need that. So a new crop came up. People like Jean Makela, Katongole, they are all trying now to attend to the situation on the ground, the condition of misery in Africa. So they came up with liberation theology and saying, no, we need more liberation rather than enculturation. I think Magesa has been labeled liberation theologian, and there's an element of liberation in his theology. But from what I know of him, he did not like to be labeled liberation theologian or any other. He was just a theologian. He didn't like labels. So another guy came, I'm now quickly going on. Another guy came up, I think it's Mugambi, who says, maybe we need to move away from liberation. Let's talk about reconstruction. Mm-hmm. We need to be like Nehemiah, who was sent to reconstruct, the ruins of Jerusalem. And so that's another thing. So all I can say from all these things, we find out that things either do we need to recover, do we need to recognize, do we need to reconstruct, do we need liberation? What is the best way forward? And I'll not tell you what others will give as my conclusion is that we need everything. We need everything. So that's why I concluded eventually when I left Chicago that we need to take the city as an example of how to do our theology. An African city, it brings everything together. And all experiences, they find different expression in the city. And the city has this element of diversity and uncertainty. And that's the future of African theology. And I think in this way, I echo what Nyamiti said 50 years ago, when he said that, we don't know where this thing is going to go. It may contribute something fresh to Christian stream of thought. It may depart from well-trodden roots of Western theology. It may reveal something too much so as to embarrass some people or other theological system. We will go in different direction. So, well and fine. This, please allow me to say this because I think this is important. It's one thing to say this might be all the ways that African theology, but what is happening? What are we doing about it? It's one thing to talk about, but what is happening? This is where my problem is. And I'm not going to now to give you an overview of where how is happening there, whether this thing is happening. I want to come to Hekima. is a Kima doing this? I tell you, after I've gone a roundabout way to theology, African theology, I end up in a Kima, and I was disappointed with what I saw here when I came. There was no enthusiasm about African theology. And the entire program is only a 2-credit course for African theology. The Mzee himself told, maybe we need to do African traditional religion before African. And I said, why don't we do history of African Christianity? And I talked to Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc says, he teaches that in his contemporary history of the church. He said, no, we need to have a specific written history of African Christianity, and it should be done before we go into African. So I was getting disappointed. Somebody said, no, in our courses, we try to include African theology. But when I was dean, I was having access to the outlines, course outlines. African theology was just an addition at the end of the course outline. There will be 1 or 2 token presence of African there. And I approached the DPA then. I said, we should do something to change this and have an African theology where it's not at the end, but it's the beginning of everything that we do. And it is that which informs how. Somebody told me, if you want to do liberation theology in Latin America, you don't do it. It informs everything that they do. So African theology has to inform what we do, such that anyone, anywhere in the world who wants to do African theology would come and say, this is where we do African theology. And it's not just a course somewhere out there. And well, my DPA then and I were like the East and the West. And I will not go there. The East is the East and the West is the West. So I'm thinking something has to be done. I'm happy things have changed. We are talking of establishing a chair of African theology. Well and fine. But I think before we go that, we need to take the faculty. Okay, 2 minutes. I know. We need to take the faculty somewhere in a good place, buy them good food and good drinks, and lock them and let them discuss what exactly can we do to make this place African. And then we come up, then we can bring an African chair after that. And I think that's the best way we can really start to do something in our small way to have African theology have a future. Otherwise, it will remain a memorial service to a dead custom, not a living tradition. So anyway, let me finish with this. My name, I'm finishing. This is 1986. Yamiti writes this, which is almost contrary to what I said. In recent years, there have been articles advising us on African theology. How African theology should be done, where it should be done, who should do it, what it should say, ad infinitum. Some of these self-made theological advisors, whether they should be African or foreign, have little or nothing to contribute beyond proffering their lavish advice. Others simply want to play the role of a theological engineers. I do not believe that theology can be produced from such advice alone. Those who feel obliged to give advice on African theology should preferably use their advice first to produce theological works, which in turn will speak to others. That's meeting. So, my sisters and brothers, I'm not giving theological advice. I am saying, let's stop talking about African theology. Let's just do it. That's the way that it can have a future. So help me God.
Amen. You see, it was necessary.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tumuseni. Even if I left this place today without learning anything else, one thing that I've learned is that Dominic wasn't born with a beard. I saw in the pictures that there was a point in time when he didn't have a beard in his life. So thank you very much for those inspiring words. We are now going to listen to Mrs. Gina Schneider, a longtime friend of Mzee Magesa. So thank you very much. You are most welcome.
Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. And I'm very, very honored to be here. It just really touches my heart. My name is Gina Schneider, and I have traveled here from the United States of America to join you at this very special event to honor our dear friend, priest and professor, Father Laurenti Magesa Corneli Majora, 1 year after his passing into the kingdom of God. On behalf of myself and my husband, Trevor, the parishioners of the Church of the Immaculate Conception and the Friends of Musoma Society, we express our deepest sorrow and give our condolences to his brother Evaristi and his family, the people of the Musoma Diocese, Hikima University College, Tangaza University College, and beyond. My husband Trevor and I are from a small town in upstate New York, USA, called Burnt Hills, where we raised our 5 children. Our parish is the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Glenville, New York, about a 10-minute drive from our house. The parish priest in 2002 was Father Thomas Conry. He needed some help, and being an open-minded, scholarly priest, he somehow found Father Laurenti Magesa, who he asked to come from the Musoma Diocese of Tanzania to serve at our parish. I clearly remember the day he asked me into his office and told me about Father Magesa. He said that a priest from Tanzania, Africa, who is a leading African theologian and an author, will be coming to serve at our parish. Father Thomas knew our family well. He asked me to welcome Father Magesa and invite him to dinner at our house because Trevor, my husband, was born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa, and so they had something in common. He asked me to invite Magesa to our home for dinner. After offering his very first Mass, I invited him to dinner that night. And I think he was a bit surprised, but he accepted, and we shared a meal together, and this was the beginning of a long and lasting friendship. Father Magesa's mother died when he was just a child. His father and mother had 11 children. 7 of them died at a young age. So after his wife died, Magesa's father was very protective of his remaining 4 children, understandably. So while he was at work, he locked Magesa in the house so he would be safe. His father was a catechist and knew the value of an education, and in their home were many books. Instead of playing with other children, Magesa developed a love for books and started writing at a young age, and an author was born. He was so well read that he knew about many topics and had such a way with words. There was always something to learn from him, and when it was time for him to go to school, he excelled. Because of the white father missionaries, he received a good education, and after becoming a priest, he studied in Ottawa in the province of Ontario, Canada at St. Paul's University and obtained his doctorate in theology and philosophy. While he was at Maryknoll, New York, he wrote African Religion and the Abundance of Life, which became a textbook in colleges and universities all over the US. He also received an honorary degree at DePaul University in the States. He has traveled for speaking engagements in many places in the United States of America and Europe and parts of Africa. He was one of the leading theologians of the African continent. His endless quest was to develop an understanding of Western and African Catholicism so they can learn from each other in a kind of blending of cultures that he called enculturation, breaking stereotypes and encouraging dialogue. He spent 2 years with us from 2002 to 2004. It was hard at first. He had to win the hearts of the people who had never seen an African priest. Also, there was no cook or help in the rectory where he was living. So he had to learn to shop for food, cook, clean, and wash clothes and fend for himself. One of the parishioners helped him learn to drive in the US, which is on the right side of the road. And with a lot of different traffic rules, he failed his driver's test several times because he was so nervous. It must have been humiliating because he had been driving in Tanzania for years. He was quickly accepted and loved by all because he was humble, non-judgmental, and open to dialogue, and he had an amazing sense of humor. He made people feel at ease. He made so many loyal friends who loved him dearly. He was a brilliant theologian, author, and holy priest who lived what he preached. His homilies were filled with wisdom, so much so that some parishioners wrote them all down for every Mass for 2 years that he was with us. He taught a course on our church on just war theory, while the US was fighting in Iraq. He loved sharing ideas and educating people. Trevor and Magesa would have lively discussions about the politics of the continent and their similar English educational upbringing, and so became very close friends. They both loved tennis and played very often. The following is a tribute, my husband's tribute to Father Magesa. He couldn't be here, so. My favorite memory of Father Magesa was when we hit tennis balls together. Because of my tennis instruction background, I thought I could teach him a few things about his game. But the reality is that he was teaching me by helping me overcome my many internal conflicts from growing up as a white man in apartheid South Africa. He accomplished this by hitting a few balls back and forth and then approaching the net for a 10-minute conversation. This was repeated multiple times over the next few hours. The ladies at the church rectory were panicking that I was going to cause him to have a heart attack. Little did they know that we only hit balls for 5 minutes of the total time we were gone. Later, when I thanked Magesa for helping me gain a deeper understanding of culture, race, and humanity, especially my own humanity, he replied in his typical humble way that these conversations gave him an excuse not to chase a ball around the court. Humility was a hallmark of Magesa's character, and with his humility, he created a space in which I could learn and grow to become a better version of myself. Monsignor Alexander Choka, a dear friend of Magesa's, came to visit in 2003. And one night at dinner, we had an indaba, which is a Zulu word for an exchange of ideas where we discussed how we could help the impoverished people of their homeland. From the Mara Musoma region of Tanzania. From this shared meal was born the Friends of Musoma Society, which has served the people of this region of Tanzania for 2 decades, in which both Magesa and Choka played a key role. We helped many students through their education, built a malaria treatment center and a solar system for a hospital in Baraki, as well as many other projects throughout the years. In 2004, Trevor and I were the first to visit Tanzania, where we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary with a full African wedding, as well as Father Magesa's 30th Jubilee. We went on a safari with Father Magesa, Monsignor Choka, and a few others, including Sister here. When Father Magesa saw the safari van was not in good condition, he complained to the driver, who said that the truck meets safari specifications. This has been a private joke ever since between Magesa and us. Every time something isn't quite right, we say that it meets safari specifications. We had a wonderful visit, and afterwards, Monsignor Alexander Choka flew home with us to serve at our parish from 2004 to 2006. Magesa and Choka encouraged cultural exchange, inviting and hosting many people from the States who traveled to Tanzania, including Father Thomas Conry, opening up people's minds to the reality of Tanzanian African culture and breaking preconceived ideas. Many people from Tanzania also visited the US and were welcomed into our home. Personally, both Choka and Magesa have been in my life and the life of our family for 2 decades. They have been there for us in good times, troubled times, sharing meals, holiday celebrations, picking apples, going on trips together, and mentoring our 5 children. They have visited the States many times and stayed at our home. Magesa spent 1 year in Washington, D.C. with a fellowship at Georgetown University, where he was hosted by the parish of my brother, Jay, and his wife. They spent many happy times together, enjoying the restaurants, libraries, and shops of D.C., and becoming great friends, cementing our family ties even closer. We consider Magesa a part of our family, along with his dear friend, Monsignor Alexander Choka, who is buried next to him. In 2008, we flew Magesa and Choka to Cape Town, South Africa, and met them at the airport. They were a bit apprehensive, and I can see why. During the trip, we took a ferry to visit Robben Island and witnessed how it must have been during Nelson Mandela Madiba's 27 years of imprisonment. Magesa was visibly moved and was silent throughout the experience. We attended Mass at a local Catholic church, and after introducing Magesa and Choka as visiting priests from Tanzania, The presiding priest didn't invite them to come celebrate or even introduce them. But the worst humiliation came from friends of our host invited us to an evangelistic prayer meeting. They said they were interested in hearing about Magesa's new book, Anatomy of Enculturation, but instead they tried to convert them, knowing they were both Catholic priests. The worst part was when they shared about how they evangelize in African countries. They would take a large boat onto Lake Malawi and scream through megaphones, telling people they need to be saved. The topic of ancestral worship came up. Now, Magesa taught us that ancestral worship in Africa is very similar to the communion of saints and intercessional prayer. The one big Afrikaner at the meeting said to Magesa and Choka, "Do you know what a monkey wrench is?" Speaking of ancestral worship, he then said, I quote, "We have to wrench the devil out of them." This is the only time that ever saw Magesa visibly upset, and we were so embarrassed. We took him out of there. Anyway, on the lighter side, in Cape Town, we took a tram up Table Mountain and saw the view. We visited the penguins on the rocks in the bay and then drove to the wine country and stayed at the only vineyard owned by a native African. We also spent time on the beautiful beaches. Magesa would sit under an umbrella reading books while Choka, Trevor, and I were enjoying the water. We had what you call a boogie board. This is a board that you lie on to ride a wave. We were having a good time riding waves, and we kept asking Magesa to try it several times. Finally, he agreed and rode in a wave. And afterwards, he joked that this was forced enjoyment. And we all had a good laugh. But then there were times when Father Magesa really did enjoy himself, like the time we watched the movie Life of Brian. He laughed with his whole body, and for years after, whenever he was reminded of the movie. Now, the movie was very irreverent and told the story of a man who was mistaken for Jesus. The three wise men went to the wrong stable. The movie humorously delved into the way human beings follow others without any critical thought process. The scene he loved the most was when a group of revolutionaries were discussing the evils of the Roman occupation, and the scene went like this. "These Romans bled us dry, and what did they ever do for us?" Suddenly, one of them says softly, "The aqueduct?" "Oh, okay, they did that." Another joins in, "Sanitations, roads?" "Okay, besides the aqueduct, sanitation, and roads, what did the Romans ever do for us?" And then someone else says quietly, "Irrigation, medicine, education?" "All right, apart from the aqueduct, sanitation, roads, irrigation, medication, and education, what did those Romans do for us?" And Father Magesa would break into this soliloquy whenever someone was not being grateful or complaining about something. Rather than joining in with the complaining, he would educate by using humor and story. He was a man of peace, although he was keenly aware of the evils of colonialism and not afraid to express his views. He also tempered this with any good that could be acknowledged. He was willing to try new things, and one winter we took him on a cross-country skiing. In the summer, we took both Choka and Magesa to an island in beautiful Lake George in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York in my very old boat, where they went swimming in the crystal clear water. During my many trips to Tanzania, we have traveled together to Bagamoyo, Zanzibar, the site of the East African slave trade, Ukerewe Island in Lake Victoria to visit Bishop Fortunatus, who was interested in opening libraries, and his house was full of books in boxes, and many other places. We have shared several celebrations in Tanzania, including the 50th anniversary of the birth of the nation, honoring Baba ya Taifa at Julius Nyereri's home at Butiama, and the 100th Jubilee of the Musoma Diocese and Mzee Choka's 80th birthday celebration in Musoma, to name a few. While he was serving at the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Glenville, he wrote his book, The Anatomy of Enculturation, and while he was at Georgetown, D.C., What is Not Sacred. The many books he has left us will keep him alive in our hearts and minds and bring people together through understanding and dialogue. He once gave us a gift of a very large coffee cup, and on it said, "Don't be afraid to be great." Father Laurenti Magesa Corneli Majora was a great man. theologian, priest, and above all, a great friend. We will miss him and his best friend, Monsignor Choka, dearly. May their souls rest in peace. And thank you all for having me, and a special thanks to Magesa's brother Evaristi Corneli and Father Marcel Winzea for inviting me to speak and give a tribute to our dear friend, Father Magesa.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gina Schneider. And thank you to Father Marcel, Father Tomuseni, Professor Evaristi Magoti. So join me in thanking them for what they have shared with us this afternoon. Thank you. And thank you to you all also for coming. Before closing, we are going to take a few minutes to get 2 or 3 reactions for those who are present. If you see in the program, it is mentioned, okay, suggestions or contributions about a way forward. The memorial conference is not meant to be an end in itself. It's just the beginning of a reflection about how to carry forward the legacy of Mzee Magesa. So if there are any 2 or 3 reactions in the crowd, they'll be most welcome. But before those reactions, I thought I would briefly say something on a personal note about my own relationship to Mzee Magesa. I read his biography at the beginning, but it was as dispassionate as anything. So I want to say something about my connection to him. He taught me here at Ekima. I was a student here from 2009 to 2012. And we became close to each other. I would sometimes go to his office to speak to him informally, not about academics, just about other issues. And at some point, he picked up that when I was being sent for theology, among the things that were being said in my evaluation, I was particularly angry about one thing. Someone had said that Norbert is afraid of women, that I was afraid of women. And I was angry about that, to the extent that when I received a letter sending me to theology, I went into my Regency Superior's office and asked him, "Are you the one who wrote this?" He told me, "No, I'm not the one." He saw how angry I was and said, "No, I'm not the one." And so I told Mzee Magesa, he laughed. At the end of that academic year, I told him, okay, I want to spend this summer somewhere quiet to read a bit and write. I have an idea, I want to put something into writing. He said, I know the right place for that. He told me, okay, you'll go to my house in Sirari. There is a library there. You'll sit there quiet. No one is going to disturb you. Somebody will cook food for you and everything. I said, wonderful. So when I arrived in Sirari, after 2 days in Sirari, someone came with a car to pick me up. I said, what's happening? They said, okay, Mzee Magesa said we should take you to Baraki. We should take you to Baraki. So they put me in the car, took me to Baraki. I thought it was for a short visit, but the guy went back and told me, okay, this is where you are going to spend the rest of the summer. And in Baraki, you have a farm and a big community of sisters, the congregation of sisters, Susanna, who is there. At the time, the postulancy was there. I don't know if he's still there. There were 30 young postulants, 13 formed sisters. I was the only man on 100 acres with 43 women. So, yes, so after 3 days, I took the phone and called him back here in Nairobi. Mzee, what's happening? He told me, how are your wives doing? I said, and then he hung up the phone. That was it. Towards the end of my stay, he came to pay me a visit and to see how things had gone. I was laughing at me because he knew he had tricked me into living there for 6 weeks with them, and everything went well. We became very good friends with all 43 of them, obviously. We became very good friends. And he kept that friendship going even without me knowing. Later on, when I left, from time to time, I would receive a message from the sister saying, thank you very much for the gifts you sent to us. I had not sent any gift. Then I will inquire from Mzee Magesa. When he was going back on his trip, each time he would bring a gift and say, it's Norbert who sent you this gift, even without me knowing. So he did that. And they thought I was just the best friend they could ever have because I was sending all these gifts, whereas I had never sent anything. I had never sent anything. So he had that side. He was more than just an academic mentor, a lecturer. he took care of other sides of our lives here at Ekima, and that's something I will be eternally grateful for to him. That's one thing I wanted to add as a personal testimony. Now, 2 or 3 reactions from the crowd if people are interested in saying something about the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norbert, and we want to thank you in a special way for organizing this. You are strongly behind this. So if the group can join me in thanking you because you have been here. My question is a question I want to put to Professor Magoti. We were together in Musoma for the funeral, and we saw the great love that Bishop Musonganzira had for Baba Magesa. How is Magesa perceived by the rest of the clergy, in what you can say? And then a future prospect, because he lived certainly, he was actually a missionary, really, here to us, but he had a home in Musoma. Anything you can say, and their perception of African theology, which can inform us as well.
I wanted also to ask something that was very dear to him. He was really advocating for the canonization of Nyerere. What is the connection and why was he so keen about that?
Thank you, Father Wineza, for your questions. I will ask you with the first one, perception of Magesa and the diocese on what they think of doing. I can assure you there will be nothing. Nothing will be done in that regard. And I told you that I'm back from Musoma, where I went to refurbish Magesa's grave. And during that time, I was able to meet some priests in the diocese. And when they knew I was going to build that grave, you know, I invited them to come, and we were sharing ideas. But my general impression is that they don't think that Magesa has a specific contribution to make, because for them, every priest has his contribution. Some priests are good at baptizing people. Some priests are good at building churches. Some priests are good at administering the sacraments. So they don't see that Magesa was exceptional. So, and because he was not exceptional, they don't think of doing anything. So I gave up. I really gave up. I invited a few who really turned up for the memorial mass. And even there during the memorial mass, the Vicar General said, oh, you know, it's very good that we meet here to remember Magesa, but actually we are all the same, you know. We should meet from time to time to pray for them, but not much, not more than that. So I really gave up. Afterwards, I met some priests who are very close to Magesa, and we said, what can we do? I mean, this should not be the end. And their suggestion was that I should meet the bishop and try to tell him what is happening outside Musoma, for him to understand that Magesa is appreciated outside his own diocese. And perhaps from there, maybe the bishop can decide to do something. But the bishop is ill, and I'm not sure that he has the energy to carry that task forward. So I don't know, but from Musoma, I don't think much will be done. On the day, after the other day when I was going to say farewell to the rector of the seminary, he saw that I had written on the grave, it is written, lying here is one of the fathers of African theology. And he asked me, is there an African theology? Should we go back to those days when our forefathers were worshiping trees and stones? And so I did not answer him, because that's an old question. It's a question that is settled already. It was discussed in the 70s, the 80s, you know. So I said, well, something for you people to discuss if you want, but I'm not going to answer that question. I think those are the two questions that Father asked. Now, coming back to the second question, to the other question you raised, the connection between Magesa and Nyerere. I'm privileged to go through his private emails and the correspondence. I realized that he had established a blog, and I think it was established here. Some of you must have helped him to establish that blog. And in that blog, it is full of articles in defense of Nyerere's sainthood. And those letters stimulated a lot of debate, actually. Even some colleagues at the University of Dar es Salaam participated in it. You had some who were saying, no, Nyerere was a politician and is not really worth the you know, to give him that respect of sainthood. But there were some scholars who are interested, who are in favor of Nyerere's sainthood. Even myself, I was very skeptical at the beginning. I said, well, why are you wasting time about Nyerere's sainthood? What we know about him is a lot, and he was not perhaps all that saintly. And Magesa's response to me was that, look, all saints are sinners. They have their own problems. There is no pure saint, you know, pure saint who is free from sin. So Nyerere may have made some mistakes, but still he can be considered for the sainthood. And for a time, the whole debate died. Actually, in Tanzania, nobody talks about the sainthood of Nyerere. But I realize that the discussion is now emerging in Rome, in the Vatican. I think on the 21st of this month, there will be a discussion about Nyerere's sainthood. I don't remember the exact formulation of the title or the theme of the conference, but it is related to that. So the question Nyerere's sainthood has not died. It is still alive, and I'm sure people will carry it forward. Thank you. I've taken too long.
Thank you very much, Father Foro, and then we'll get, we are told there are a few reactions online.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to all presenters. I believe you are setting a ground for the next publication of Hekima University College in homage to Professor Laurenti Magesa. From the information we gather, I believe the good writers of the college are now invited to take on the systematic theology of Laurenti Magesa, since your enemy here, Dominic, thank you, said actually he wasn't labeled or labelable. At the beginning, yes, when I was a student here in 2000, he had published Abundant Life, and that was a textbook we're using. And Charles Nyamiti of blessed memory, likewise, introduced him as among the liberation theologians of Africa. Alan Busacks and others, there are many of them. But slowly, when I saw Anatomy of Inculturation, that apparently was fighting against, because he was fighting against Nyamiti at first, finally, he was a systematic theologian. But the first book I really discovered from Magesa was the African Religions African Religion in the Dialogue Debate, a very profound book. And I could understand from there the sainthood of Nyerere, because he's a community builder. The church is a communion, and whoever builds the communion is a church person. And that's the summary of our ethics. So systematic theology, moral theology, and the spirituality of Laurenti Magesa. And if we are intending to call our African chair, the Laurenti Magesa African Chair of Theology in Hekima University College, well, maybe by April, we need to have that book out. But please gather all the good writers and have that book out. Thank you.
I'm sure you are one of the good writers, Father Faro. So we are going to look at some of the reactions online. If you can put them up there so that. Okay. Okay. We first want to thank those who joined us online. I'm starting to get old, so I hope I'll be able to. Oh, wow. Where do I begin, Abel? From a question, not from the thank you, perhaps. If there is a question, so that we gain time. No question, eh? So you wanted me to echo some. Okay, people can read probably. So now I'm seeing NM there. It is also very important to support the translation of his works into Kiswahili and go further to even simplify the material in accessible ways to the people of God. The reality is few faithful outside theological and academic circles have actually encountered and engaged with his work. Baba's bishop in Musoma was also aware of this. This is something that can be supported in line with Baba Magesa's love for the African family and communal values, as he expressed in his synodality article published in the African Synodality Initiative booklet. And then there's a question, do we still have African Mass at Hekima? They all good memories. And then prophets are not recognized in their own homes. And then, now, good evening to you, dear friends. I thank the HUC for organizing this memorial conference for Professor Laurenti Magesa. I appreciate greatly the sharing of the different speakers. Mrs. Gina shared some interesting moments of Professor Magesa. I liked a lot about how he would react to people complaining, found a way of teaching with humor in regards to what the complaint was all about. I'm really glad that I have been present. Okay, I thought there was a question. That's fine. So thank you very much to all those who are following us online and for your reactions. So as I mentioned, this is just the beginning of a conversation on how to carry forward the legacy of Mzee Magesa. Thank you very much for coming. And the rain that's beginning, take it as a shower of blessing, a smile from above. So we are very grateful that you were able to make time to be here with us today. I will leave the principal to give the closing remarks, and Father Steve Eowa will help us conclude with those special prayers of his. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mine is really a word of gratitude. Let me begin by all of you. We have almost 40 people here. We had, I think, around 40 here. With the passing of time, you come to realize you're really friends. Experience teaches us. And so sometimes you, at the very beginning, you have this glamorous crowd, but with time, really, you begin to count them on your fingers. At least my experience has shown that. And so to you, Professor Magoti, and your second half, and also the whole crew that accompanied you, we want to ask the congregation here, the Hekima community, to thank you for making the trip from Dar es Salaam to Musoma to honor and bless the tomb, and then travel from Sirari to Hekima. You are yesterday almost at 7 p.m. So it's wonderful that you came. Please join me, thank them in a very special way. And of course, in thanking you, we have no doubt that Father Magesa is around with us. So may we continue to carry the legacy of him. And Father Bironiri was telling me when he first arrived here to come and teach, Magesa was also arriving. So, they shared wonderful memories. I have wonderful times with Bironir. So he was saying, look, Magesa's presence here was a fulfillment of the dream of Pedro Arupe. I wanted a school of theology where African theology is done. We still have a long way to go, as we have noticed. And so with the young generations that is here, we can see that we are not wasting time. It's good to know certainly the tradition of where others have been and to be in conversation with patristic fathers, medieval fathers, Reformation, and of course, contemporary. But in Rwanda, we say, water can get hot, but ultimately it will be cold. It comes home. This is our home. So it's better to know with our own tradition from which we can reflect and have a wider horizon. And so this occasion, this celebration that we have had, I think is only an iceberg of a bigger conversation we will have. Join me thank Father Norbert, who from the very beginning, when we were looking at the program for the new academic year and initiating activities of the 40th anniversary of Hekima University College, I tried to put, the DPA was not yet around, so I was doing both. So I said, what will be the most appropriate date for this day? And so I said, the anniversary of his new birth in heaven is on the 11th of August, but we had not yet started the new academic year. And so gathering people would have been difficult. It was not the most appropriate time. And so in prayer and in reflection, and mind you, some inspirations come when you're having a shower. This actually came. Then I said, the 2nd of November will be the best day. So I checked with a few people, particularly in the registry, because they were helping me, and we thought this was the best day. And I think it was, commemorating all the faithful departed. And Magesa is with us. And then when Father Norbert came, and I asked him to lead this initiative, he did it with magnanimity. I certainly knew there is this connection of women. And so I usually, I know who to tap and people's interest. That's part of leadership. So I knew it would be easy to go. So to you, Norbert, let me ask the congregation here to thank you in a profound way. Very much. So in the team, in the task force, there was Father Gaspar, Father Festo, and Sister Njeri. And for those who know, Njeri galvanized the whole group when we were trying to see how we can transport the body of Magesa from Musoma, from Dar es Salaam to Musoma. Sister Njeri works with the Hilton Foundation. So we were able to gather some money through actually M-Pesa. Then the body was able to be transported. So when I was thinking who would be in the committee, that's how I put her there, because I know she's in the States, so she couldn't be with us here. She's probably they are waking up now where she is. So to the whole team, Gaspar, Festo, Sister Njeri, and to you, Norbert, thank you for a job well done. And to all of you, the superior of the Jesuit community, to all of you who have we are in the midst of the academic year and the semester is intense and you have dedicated this time, it cannot be taken for granted. May God continue to bless you all. And now I leave words to our prayer man, and I think it's rightly so to lead us in a concluding prayer. And to our speakers and to all of you, may God bless you.
Perhaps before the prayer, perhaps I should just say something very peculiar, I would say. As a student here also, I had the opportunity of encountering Magesa, and he taught me African theology. And I saw myself for the very first time in my life writing a poem about the ecclesia brewed in Africa, thanks to the inspiration from Laurenti Magesa. And so is indeed an inspiration to every one of us here. And so we now conclude our prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. God of all creation, God of our ancestors, ours is a prayer of gratitude, for your faithfulness consistently shapes our journey. We wandered through the past 40 years, tested like your chosen people, and tried like your beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Even when our weaknesses and failings have become great enough to attract your wrath, like the faithful spies, you reveal that the past years are only a glimpse of the greatness ahead. Trusting in your faithfulness, therefore, Lord, we pray that this celebration of our 40th anniversary will not end our reign like the 3 successive Hebrew kings. Rather, may we embrace the Mosaic wisdom, experience the Davidic victory, and like Christ, ascend into an eternal glorious future. And we make this prayer through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, and our brother, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. In the name of the Father, Son, and of the Holy Spirit.